what's up? Jason here, and today we're going to talk about something I think is important no matter where you are in your game development career, and that's how to get a job. We'll talk about how to get a job if you've never had one before in the industry, or maybe you've got one and you're looking for new positions, been laid off recently. And also I want to talk about what it's like getting a job as a more senior and advanced developer. We'll go through the process that I use and a couple of the tips that I like to recommend to friends and other people. And hopefully it helps you get a job in the future or just improve the one that you've got. Before we get started though, I just wanted to say, please, if you don't mind, share the video, like it, subscribe, all of that stuff. It really does help get the word out and let other people see what's going on. And it kind of encourages me to keep recording and doing more. So let's get started. So when you're looking for a game job, there are generally 3 different positions that are getting filled. There's a programmer, which is what I'll talk about a lot because that's what I do and what I know really well. There's designers who do the game implementation and the design. And then there's the artists who, of course, make the art. There are, of course, other positions, sound, production, testing, lots of other things, and I'll maybe briefly touch on those, but the biggest ones that you're going to be applying for and what most of the positions are that are available are in those 3. It's either design, art, or programming. Now, which one of those is easiest to get into is up for debate a little bit. I personally feel like getting a programming job is a lot easier than getting a design job, but I also know designers who think that the idea of learning how to program to get a programming job is insane, and doing the design stuff is super easy to get. So let's start with the first step, and that is that you actually have to have some idea how to do the job. Before you even go about the process of applying, you need to know how to do the job. You can't just go in and say, hey, I'd like to be a game designer. I have no idea how to design games, but I've played a couple before. Or I'd like to be a programmer, but I've never really coded before, or I did a tutorial once or twice, and I just want to learn on the job. That's not really an option in the game industry. There's a lot of competition, and you need to be, at the very least, learning this stuff on your own before you're applying and relatively good at it. And of course, the better you are at it when you get started, the better you'll do at these interviews and the more likely you are to get hired quickly. So let's say you're in a position where you kind of understand the basics. Maybe you can create your own game, your own little mini game. You can make a little mobile game and put it together. Might not be the best thing, but you can at least build a game and you've got some understanding of how to do things. How do you get started there? Well, there are a couple options. The first is, of course, to just start sending out your resume to all of the different job openings. And if you're not sure where to find those, the best places I've found tend to be like Gamasutra's job forums. Unity's new system for jobs is pretty cool too. I've looked on Reddit and some of the bigger job sites, but generally the big job sites are pretty bad and you're not going to find much for the junior stuff. But Gamasutra is a great place. The better place, though, that I found for new developers who are just trying to get started, but again, can at least build a project and don't need to be completely handheld, is user groups. So this is definitely going to be very regional. Where I am right now, there are, I think, 3 or 4 Unity user groups within a 1-hour drive. For everybody else, that's of course going to vary. Some people have to drive like 2-3 hours to a group and they go once a month. But if they're available and they're local, they are by far one of the best places to get a job as a new developer. You don't have to be great at coding. You don't have to be super experienced. And you don't have to be super outgoing, but you do have to actually show up and talk to people. And the reason that these work out so well is that usually at user groups, there are people there recruiting. I mean, realistically, the thing is that there are just people there who are looking for developers who are very interested in the job and interested in the community and the career. There's a big difference between a developer who's, maybe even gone to college, learned how to code, learned how to make some games, and never talked to anybody, never goes anywhere, and doesn't do anything outside of that. From them to a developer who's constantly engaged with the community, you're going to see night and day difference in how easy it is to get a job. Unfortunately, the college education, I'd say, doesn't stack up as well as just the community involvement and the getting to know people, talking to people, when it comes to these beginning jobs. Now, of course, that changes as we get higher up. But when it starts off just getting a job, generally people want to know that, one, you're very driven, you're interested in learning, and you're going to get good. and that two, you're just very interested in the job, that it's going to be a passion for you. It's going to be something where you're going to want to work on the thing. You're going to be driven to build better games or to improve things. What you don't want to find is, when you're hiring, what you don't want is developers who like just kind of want to come in, get the paycheck, do the bare minimum, and then get out. And that's what you find a lot of the time outside the game industry. I've seen that time just kind of endless in non-game dev programming jobs. You see, probably about half the people there are just kind of there for the paycheck. They're doing what they need to do. They're 0% interested in the job. They find it relatively boring. The game industry, that's very rare. Most of the people that I know that work in the industry do it not only for the money, because it does pay pretty well, even though people say it's bad. It isn't. It pays pretty well. But they do it because they just also love the job, right? There's nothing better than going to work and like being excited to go in and do this next thing, or you can't sleep because you're excited to go to work and finish something or build some system that you were working on. And some people might think that's crazy, right? But that's just because you don't have a job that you love that is also like the kind of thing that you would do as a hobby. And that's where we're going with this. That's what you want to be at. When you're getting into the game industry, try to work towards having a job that you just love, that is the kind of thing you would do for free if you were infinitely rich, right? Like that's kind of where I try to point my compass, and what I aim at is like, if I had unlimited money, what would I be doing? Now, can I figure out a way to do that and make enough money, because it's not all unlimited. So going to these user groups, by the way, isn't just enough. You have to do more than just show up. You're going to need to go and actually talk to people. Like I said, there are a lot of people there recruiting, and you're not going to know who's recruiting all the time without just kind of getting into conversations. And the way it happens a lot of the time is you'll see a group of people just kind of gather around. It's kind of strange. It's a lot like being in a school. You'll see a bunch of people gather around and just start talking about something, and you can just kind of walk around and see if anybody's talking about something that sounds a little interesting. And usually people will let you kind of join in on the conversation and add something, or just listen and learn. Sometimes there are people that are just kind of listening. And then a lot of the time the jobs just come up. People start asking about like, hey, do you know of any openings? Or more often what I usually see is, hey, I've got this position, I need somebody to fill it. It's either a contract position, like I've got this little job that needs to be done, or it's I need to hire 3 new developers, a junior, a senior, and a mid-level, or 2 junior developers, or whatever it is. This is where those happen the most. So you'll see little parts in meetups where people will kind of go out and maybe publicly say, hey, I'm a recruiter from this thing and I'm looking for these positions. And I see that at almost all of them near the beginning. But then the bigger conversations and the best job opportunities come kind of at the end of the meetup, when everybody is gathering around and just talking. So if you go to these meetups, don't just go sit, stay silent, and run right out the door. As uncomfortable and weird as it may feel at first, just kind of hang out, chat, and try to start talking to people. And as you start making these contacts and meeting people, you're going to find that it gets dramatically easier to get a job, because not only will people, possibly give you job options right there, or tell you about new openings that they have and invite you to apply to them, especially if you start talking to them. But if you become regular to these things, you start showing up all the time, you're going to make friendships and connections here. And then these people will reach out to you for jobs. This happens, I'd say, all the time for me, and just about all of the developers that I know personally that go to meetups. Either somebody else that we know is reaching out to them and offering them things, or I do it myself all the time too. If I'm at a meetup and I've got an opening and I'm talking to somebody who seems like they may be a viable option, I will definitely bring it up to them and start a conversation. So definitely just talk to people. Go to these things, talk to people, make some contacts, just be nice. Don't be critical and don't be a jerk, and it's pretty easy. Like, that's literally the only rule. Like, be nice and talk about code stuff. Ask questions if you got questions. And people like to talk, so give them the opportunity. Now, if you don't have user groups available, because that's definitely not an option for everybody, there are some alternatives. So if you can't get to a user group, maybe it's a 2.5-hour drive each way, and that's just a little bit crazy. Then what do you do? Well, what I like is online chat stuff. So I like things like not so much Reddit, but more Discord chats, Slack channels. It's mostly Discord now, though. And making friends and contacts in those channels. So I'll get in there and just make some friends, talk to people, answer some questions, ask some questions, and eventually people start communicating, and you'll find job opportunities in there as well. Now, you can, if you're just a beginner, you can skip past all of the answering questions and stuff and just go into these Discord chats, and most of the time you'll find that they have a job section. Like some of the biggest game dev Discords have their own job sections. They're relatively active. Now, I've got a Discord channel that does not have a job section, I don't think. And if it does, it's not very active. But there are some that are really cool. And if you guys know of any, please just drop a link down below in the comments so that people can go check it out. If you have a Discord that's got lots of good job opportunities, please share it there so that everybody can see it. I don't want to bias it towards anyone, but there are a lot of them out there. So far, I've mostly been talking about finding the jobs and meeting these people who actually are hiring and have the opportunities available. But that's not the most important part, right? Once you've found the jobs, you do have to actually go through some sort of an interview and application process. And this is extremely easy to screw up. It's very easy to make a big mistake here and disqualify yourself very, very quickly. Now, there are a couple ways that I've seen people do it. The first is just to be lazy, right? Like they'll send in a really crappy looking resume that looks like they just wrote it up in Notepad that says, hey, I went to college, I did one project in college, and that's about it. Oh, and I worked at the mall once. And that's the entirety of their application. And they're sending that in against a bunch of people who are doing a whole lot more, and they're instantly just getting disqualified. Like you see that resume, you're just going to toss it. I don't care what the college is. If it's like you went to the nicest school ever, still, if your resume is just like I went to school, learned how to make games, did a school project, that's it. We're going to move on to the next one because it's not showing that drive and ambition. It's not showing the excitement for the industry or the job. And that's really what you want because you're hiring these people to work with you. You don't want people that you're going to have to constantly motivate and drive and get to do it. You want people that are kind of bringing that energy in and helping you along the way. Now that might sound like, you're asking a lot from a junior developer, but if you have the option, like you got the developer who's a badass and really, really wants the job and really wants to work hard and do cool things, or the one who doesn't, you're always going to take the one that's better. So you want to the goal here is to be the better one, be the best option so that your resume is the one that goes right to the top and you're the one that gets hired. So a couple things that you can do for that. The first is probably a bit daunting, and that's create some sort of a portfolio. Now, you might think like, hey, I don't know how to create a portfolio. I don't know how to make web stuff. I don't know how to, maybe I don't even have anything to show. Most of the time, first off, the website of it, like hosting it online, should be relatively straightforward. It doesn't have to be anything advanced. You can use some free hosting, spend $5 a month or $5 a year and just get some decent hosting and just put up screenshots and descriptions and text of what you've done. You don't have to make it look pretty because you can use a theme or a template that does it already. But don't just go, hey, it doesn't matter if it's nice or pretty because this is the game industry. Like making things nice and pretty is part of your job. So if you're going to you're going to throw up a really shitty looking website, you better have really good stuff on there to counteract that. And instead just use a nice looking template or a nice theme that kind of makes your portfolio pop a little bit more. Now, if you don't have anything for a portfolio, it's time to do a little bit of hackathon and game jam stuff. So what you need to do is start looking for these things. They happen all the time. There's the Ludum Dare and like Global Game Jam, and probably I would bet there are dozens of different game jams and game competitions that you can join in that last for anywhere from a day to a week, where you're building out games and publishing them and showing them. So doing this, even if it may seem like, okay, I'm going to make these really crappy things and they're not going to be impressive, the fact that you did it and the other guy with the single page resume didn't sets you aside already. Like it doesn't have to be the best thing. It doesn't have to be the prettiest thing. It's going to be relative to your level. So if you're junior and you're really new, as long as you've done it, like the fact that you've shown that, hey, like this guy's constantly in game jams, he's definitely into it, or she, whatever, it's going to make a big difference. huge difference. And the other thing is that you want to be the guy that's not afraid to put your stuff out. So if you're, like, hey, I did a bunch of game jams, but they were all terrible and I didn't want to show them to anybody, that's not going to help. That's just going to hurt. So you want to put them up, make them, even if they're not great, share them. Now, if you're a more intermediate level, then these game jams may be more of a common thing for you. You might be used to it, and you can probably put a lot more polish into them. And in fact, I'd say if you're at the intermediate level, maybe you've got 3-4 years of experience here, then in your portfolio, make sure that you're showcasing the things that look really nice. Don't just showcase everything in the order that you did it. Don't show your worst stuff first. And even if you're beginning, show your best thing first, because most of the time that's what people are going to go to. They're going to go to your portfolio. They're going to see the first thing there. They're going to look at that. And if that is terrible, it may disqualify them from even going down to look at the nicer, cooler things. So make sure that you put best foot forward and that everybody can see the coolest stuff that you can do. So this portfolio is going to be linked on your resume and ideally in a cover letter. And then this is kind of important because if you're a beginner and you're just getting started, your resume is still, even if it's done really nicely, is going to be pretty weak. So you're going to want to write a cover letter. And a cover letter is just basically 2 paragraphs explaining why you want the job and how you think you can help there. So if you leave either of those parts out, you're kind of doing yourself a big disservice. You really want to explain like what it is about that job specifically that you think is exciting and interesting. Now, don't write, hey, I'm really excited because I want to make a video game and I heard making video games is fun. You need to actually do some research, pay attention to the job that you're applying for, and explain why you think that specific job at that company on whatever those projects might be interesting and fun, and how you would like to contribute to that and how you'd like to make that better. Because right there, your job is basically selling yourself that, hey, you should let me come in and help you make this better. And if you're not doing that, you're just saying, hey, I just want money and I want you to teach me stuff, then nobody's interested in that, right? Nobody wants to pay you to teach you how to do stuff and to try to get you to do things. They want to pay you to come in and do the things that they need done and to help them and to learn with them and grow with them. So make sure that you have a good cover letter, especially if you're a beginner. Even if you're not a beginner, if this is a job you really care about, write something up. It doesn't have to be long. You don't have to give a whole life description. Nobody cares that you're going hiking with your dog or whatever. It's just relatively unimportant info about you. Doesn't matter. Put the stuff that people care about, the stuff that's going to say how you can contribute to the team. If you have a special interest in networking code and they do multiplayer games, okay, I'm very interested in multiplayer stuff. I've been studying this and learning a lot about it, and that's where I focus. Let them know. Let them know the things that you're going to do that are going to help. Now, let's talk about the resume. So I briefly touched on this a couple times. It needs to be good. Just like your portfolio needs to be well formatted and clean, your resume should as well, because again, you're going to be up against other ones. And if yours looks like some crappy notepad doc that you threw together in 5 minutes and the other person looks like they've actually spent some time, invested energy in putting their thing together, and they've also modified it and customized it to the position, they're going to do a whole lot better. So let's talk about customizing the resume to the position. This is something that recruiters will do all the time. They know this stuff. More experienced people applying for jobs are going to do this. But say you've got a list of your skills, right? You've got maybe it's a list of 10 of the top things that you're really good at. Maybe one of them's Unity, one of them is maybe C++ or SQL Server or rendering systems or physics systems, networking systems, right? You've got this list of the things that you're really good at that are in your skills section. When you're applying for a job, reorganize that list. Because what happens is people see that list and innately you're going to just assume that the things at the top are the strongest and the things at the bottom are the weakest. And I think it's just a natural side effect of humans and the way that we prioritize things. We normally prioritize the biggest or best things at the beginning and then go all the way down. So you want to put the things that are most applicable to the job at the top. So if it's a Unity specific job, put Unity at the top. If you're good with Unity and Unreal, push Unreal down a bit. Don't make it seem like you're at the same. Focus the Unity specific stuff. If it's an Unreal job, flip that right around. Move the Unity stuff way down, put the Unreal stuff at the top. If it's primarily doing physics stuff, maybe it's a physics-based game and you know that's what they're working on, then focus on your physics experience if that's what you have and that's what your skill set is. The point here is that you don't want to make up skills, you don't want to add in things that you don't have, but you want to rearrange and reorganize these things so that they make sense and that they show off the things that you're going to bring the team first. Because that's, again, when you see a giant list of stuff, you see the first thing, that's the one that's going to stick the best. So you want that thing to be the most important and the most valuable. Now, this same rule applies if you have lots of job experience on there and you've maybe listed off the different things that you've done for these companies. Don't rearrange the job order, but rearrange those things that you've done. So sometimes we'll list the different kind of accomplishments that we've made on the projects. And if you know that some of those accomplishments align a lot more with the new job, then make sure that you highlight those and bring those to the top, because that's what's going to get you, again, to the front of their mind. So what about resume length? This is another thing that I see people mess up a lot, and that's that they end up just making it either way too short or way too long. So a good length is generally 1 to 2 pages. 2 pages is usually ideal, because it means that they've got enough experience there that it doesn't all fit onto a single page, but they don't have just everything that they've ever done listed, because nobody gives a damn. Right? You don't want to get too long on it, and you don't want to get too short. Now, if you're a junior developer just coming in, no experience, you might wonder, like, what can I put on there? Again, put those projects that you've done, the same stuff that's on your portfolio, explain them a little bit in there. Now, I wouldn't explain one-day little projects, but if you've done anything that's of some significance, you worked on it even for a week, you released it, finished it, put some info about that. Put your bigger school projects, if you just did school projects, put a little bit about that and what you did on the team specifically that really stood out. The part that you really contributed to the most, where you, I think, made the most impact, is important to explain, because if you just say, like, hey, I worked on a team with 4 people and made this game, nobody knows if you were the guy who did everything, or maybe you were the guy who just kind of sat in the corner and downloaded some sound every now and then, didn't really contribute. You need to actually show off and explain the parts that you really contributed to. And if you're in school and just doing this stuff, doing these projects, don't just sit around and slack off on these things. If you're just sitting around and slacking off, you're just screwing yourself for the rest of your life. You're making it harder for yourself. If you don't enjoy it, you don't like what you're doing, I'd say find something else that you're going to enjoy and love. All right, so let's say you followed my advice, you went to some groups, or you joined some chats, you found some job opportunities, you sent in a great resume with a good portfolio, and now it's time to interview. This is another part where people generally struggle, and I used to really hate this part. The whole having to talk to people and justify why you're good enough to work there, right? It feels kind of crappy. It's never really been something that I really loved, or most people love. But there are some easy ways to make it a lot easier and make it a lot smoother and just kind of improve your odds here. The first thing that I recommend, and I really hate saying this, but take some interviews for jobs that you're not 100% sure you're sold on. So maybe there are some jobs that I might want to work there maybe, but it's probably not your dream job. Do those interviews first. If you have the opportunity to apply for a lot of jobs and you're getting any callbacks on these, try to do the interviews for the jobs in, I guess, reverse priority order. So do the one that you care about most last. The main reason for this is that you'll get more comfortable as you go through the process. Even if for somebody who has a job and hasn't interviewed in 5 years, going through that process 2 or 3 times on jobs where you're not so stressed out about it can be a whole lot easier for the final one where it's like, hey, this is the job I really care about. That doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily get the job that you care about or that you should turn down the other jobs. But I found personally that the stress level on applying for a job that you don't really care too much about is almost zero. Like if you're not you're going to be sad and pretty unhappy if you don't get the job and you're going into it, as long as you're not financially strained or anything, it's usually a lot easier process. And then you can get a lot more comfortable just talking to people, answering the questions, and getting used to the questions. And you'll find that a lot of the time almost all of the time. The questions are very similar. You're going to have overlap in just about every interview. I don't think I've ever had an interview that didn't have questions that I'd heard in previous interviews. Now, there'll be some new stuff every time, but a lot of the time it's a lot of repeat of the same kinds of things, like what have you done? How would you solve this problem? And what was some problem that you had to solve before? And that's one that it's kind of a boring question, I think, but it's one that pops up every time. Like, they're going to ask you, what was a problem that you had to solve and how did you solve it? And you want to have a good answer for it. And you should probably have more than one, because sometimes they'll ask you for another one or just not like your answer. And things like this could just be like, hey, we were working on this game and we noticed that the build times were really slow. So I found a way to improve the build times by 50%, or I found a workflow issue with our game designers and was able to improve it dramatically with this thing. Or found something that we couldn't implement and I figured out some special solution by looking on Stack Overflow or reaching out to this one person that knew these things and learning the stuff. So you want to have a couple examples just kind of ready, and they don't have to be amazing examples, but you don't want to try to come up with them on the fly, because it's a whole lot harder. Like, when you're in that interview situation, you're already usually surrounded by 2 or 3 other people that you don't know who are critically interviewing you, asking you, trying to disqualify you essentially. So you want to make sure that you're ready, that you have the answers for the things that are going to be commonly asked there. Another thing that comes up very often are basic algorithm questions. Now, if you're really fresh out of college, sometimes these are very easy. If you've been working in a game dev job and it's been 5 years since you had to look at these questions, I generally recommend doing a little bit of research on them and just kind of going through some of the more common algorithm questions. But I don't have a whole lot of advice here, because I really just hate those questions in general. I think that most of the time they're, I guess they would say that they give incorrect info. They'll tell you that somebody knows an algorithm, but not that they know exactly when they should use that, why they should use that, and all of the times that they shouldn't use it. It also doesn't tell you that they know how to make a game. I found a lot of the time people will really, really be good at algorithms, and then you'll look at their code and just be like, holy crap, like there's a really nice algorithm in there, but the code is completely unreadable and completely useless. And that's something that I like to stress a lot just in interviews when I talk to people about, what are my preferences. And one of the big things is having good, clean, readable, understandable code. And if you're talking in an interview about that, make sure that, if that's the kind of thing that you like and think is important, which you should, especially if you're watching this channel, make sure that you stress those things, that, like you're focused on very clean code, reusable components, making stuff that is extensible and not going to break, and ideally even unit testable. Some other interview strategies. So learn who you're interviewing with. And this is a huge one that's extremely easy and kind of separates out the lazy people again. You'll almost never get an interview request without the name of the interviewer. And if you're applying for a game dev job, you should probably have some internet access and a computer and the ability to Google that person, figure out who they are, what they like, what they've done, what projects they've worked on. Maybe they worked on one of your favorite games, a game that you played all the time. That's something that you can somewhat bond on and kind of ease that relationship and that communication. So if you have, even if it's outside the game industry, some sort of common interest, and you know that they have a common interest. Now, don't try to go like, hey, I hear you like bike riding, and I like bike riding when you walk in. But if somehow these things can kind of work into the conversation, they ask you your hobbies, and you know that you have a similar hobby, like, hey, share the similar hobby. Kind of. The main reason for this is that it makes the people feel more comfortable, right? It's more like you're talking to a friend or another human instead of you're talking to a resume and trying to determine that resume. And the other thing is that these people have to work with you, right? They have to work with you day to day. So if you're easy to get along with, easy to talk to, and you're not going to be a pain to communicate with, it's going to help a lot. And you can show some of that just by bonding and sharing similar likes and hobbies, because it's an easy thing to talk about. Now, if your like and hobby is code, that's awesome. Just make sure that the person that you're interviewing with is into that. I've had times where I tried to talk to people about code too much and then found out, oh yeah, well, I'm actually an artist. Like, oh, I didn't even know. Like an artist who knows about code, and they're just kind of like trying to entertain me. But make sure that it's the right audience for the type of thing that you're talking about. And also, the more you can talk about these kinds of things, the stuff that you've done or the things that you have in common with the code things that you have, the less time there is for just dumb brain teaser riddle questions, because those tend to come in when they need to fill time. They're like, hey, we have an hour interview. We kind of know what we want to ask, and then we'll just ask all of these default brain teasers because we don't know what the hell else to do. We're kind of out of ideas. So just make sure that you can do that. Research the person, learn about them, figure out who they are, what they like, and be ready for it. Now, obviously, don't take advantage of it. Don't try to lie and make shit up because you get hired and they're like, hey, I thought you liked mountain climbing and you've never climbed a mountain in your life. It's gonna cause problems. So don't make shit up and don't try to pretend that you're their buddy or something. But bond on the things that you can, and especially if you can bond on the code or the game related things, like projects that people have worked on before. If you have this is a great one too. If you have a developer that you're working with who worked on a project that you like, and you have some actual questions about that project, like how they did different things, bring these up, show the interest and show the desire to understand and learn how some of these bigger, more complicated things are done and put together, because then they're going to know, hey, this person really wants to learn these things and can help contribute in these ways later. Now, it might not always help, but it almost always helps. So definitely do that. All right, I've been going on for a long time, so I want to dive into getting a job as a more experienced developer now and just talk about this a little bit more. So if I personally need to get a job, well, generally what I do is just reply to some emails, because as you get more experienced as a developer, you'll see that job offers just start coming. And the more experienced you are, the more projects you've worked on, and the more public you are about it, the more you'll see opportunities just kind of present themselves. Now, most of the time I don't take these offers, but what I do, and this is very important and relevant, is share them with my friends. So I will meet other developers, and as I see where they're at with their level, if opportunities appear, I'll just kind of refer them over. Say, hey, I know this guy. He's at that level that you're looking for, at about the price range you want. And if you're interested, here's their info, and try to get them in contact. And it's not just me, though. There's a reason I'm saying this is a lot of your friends in the game dev industry know about game jobs constantly. You were constantly hearing about, hey, there are some opportunities here. This company's hiring. This place is looking for stuff. And a lot of the time, these are jobs that aren't even posted on boards. They're not publicly available yet, because long before it gets through HR what you're looking for, right? The dev team almost always has hey, we have this opening. We need to fill in these 2 spots. Maybe it's 2 people that left. And the HR process could be days to months. You never know. So knowing people and just talking to them and letting them know your situation can go a huge, huge way to just getting jobs easily. And again, this kind of ties into that user group thing, because a lot of those people at the user groups that are talking about these jobs, sometimes they're not their own jobs. They're jobs that they've heard from a friend or a coworker or a colleague. Now, if you've been in the industry long enough and you're not a total dick, you're going to have enough friends in the game industry working at other companies too, where if you're looking for an opportunity, you can usually just reach out to your network and find a couple things that are available. And a really good example of this is when there are game dev layoffs. These happen pretty regularly, and you probably see them on the forums all the time. But when this happens, what I've always seen is every game company I'm at, they start reaching out to developers at that company, or they start saying, hey, does anybody know anybody from that company who is looking for this role? Because we're filling these roles. This company just had major layoffs. Hey, let's reach out to them, see if anybody knows it. And it's, in that case, almost always just about personal contacts. Now, again, you don't have to be super friendly and best friends with everybody, but you have to be at least cordial, be kind, be nice, and be helpful, and just again, don't be a jerk. Be nice to each other, and you'll find that a lot of people will refer opportunities to you and just give you different job options. And also, if you're in that situation, make sure that you do the same. You know, if people are looking for jobs and you know about them, share the info, let them know. And if you have tips for how to get jobs, drop them down below, please, because I've kind of listed off a lot of the things that I do and that I recommend, but I'm sure there are a ton of people who've applied for way more jobs than I have, hired way more people than I have, who might also have some really good advice on where to find these jobs, how to get through the interview process or a little bit better, how to prepare for it better, and then just how to get hired and get into the industry. And I gotta say, once you're in, it's pretty awesome. At least at every company I've been at, I've of course heard horror stories. I'm sure we all have, but everywhere I've been in the game industry, it's just been awesome. It's always great. You get to work with fun people, make fun things, and I mean, you get paid to make video games. What could be better, right? I guess getting paid to do nothing, but close enough. Anyway, I hope this is helpful. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I plan on just blabbing and talking a bit more about things like this in the future. One of the things I want to talk about real soon is the time when I got laid off right after getting my first game job, which is pretty interesting and pretty scary, but also led to lots of awesomeness. So goodbye. Thanks for watching. Again, if you got comments, questions, drop them below. And please don't forget to share this stuff because it makes a huge difference with YouTube and it makes me smile. All right, bye.